Welcome to episode 28 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. This Behavioral Economics Foundations episode is all about the sense of touch. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. We have made it to the final installment in the series on the five senses. We've already talked about sight, smell, taste, and hearing, and today we are digging into the sense of touch. I've truly enjoyed this series on the senses, and I was really surprised to see how the numbers shook out. I was sure that sight was going to be the most popular and that taste and smell would have less downloads than the other three, since service-based businesses might assume that those didn't apply to them. But so far, smell has actually been the most downloaded of the four, which obviously we've got an option here for touch. It might make a triumphant jump in the numbers. So sight did come in second place, so I was right there. But smell is currently number 9 on the most popular downloads of the entire podcast, which is pretty cool. And like I said, I was really surprised by it. It's been really fun for me to watch the podcast grow and evolve since it launched 6 months ago, which is just amazing to think that it's only been 6 months. It's been an amazing 6 months. This actually ends, I was sort of doing the math and thinking about it, and being episode 28 since I went live with 3 when the podcast launched on July 6th. And thank you to all of you who've been listening since the beginning. I know there are quite a few of you, and I appreciate you. That would mean that this episode wraps up the series on the senses. It wraps up the entire year, and it closes out 6 months, which is making it really just an amazing episode for me, and one that has had me reflecting a lot over the last couple of weeks as I've been prepping, and it's just been a really amazing time. As I said, smell was surprising to me and became number 9 on those most popular downloads of all time. Next week, I'm going to include a countdown of the best of the podcast with the complete top 10. So you'll get to know those. Right now, the top 5 most downloaded episodes are in a highlights video on Instagram, where you can find me as The Brainy Biz. That's B-I-Z, if you want a little sneak peek. The top countdown videos are going to make their way to all the social media channels once the year is up. And while it's hard to choose, I would say I think my favorites of the top 10 are reciprocity, the top 5 wording mistakes businesses make, and the truth about pricing. Did any of your favorites make the list? Be sure to check out the Brainy Business social channels, where, again, you can always find me as The Brainy Biz, and then you can find out. And please let me know if there is an episode you really liked or a topic that you're interested in. I get people all the time letting me know, asking about topics to see if they're going to be the focus of a future series or episode. I've had requests on centrality theory, which is interesting. That'll be coming next year. Also, questions about choice architecture and nudges and overwhelmed brain, all sorts of really fun. Oh, color theory. I get that question a lot. That's definitely coming next year. So if you have something you're interested in, let me know. Give me a shout out. I would be happy to bring it into the mix, as there will be plenty of episodes moving forward. And as this is the final episode of the year, I want to do a very special shout out. This shout out is to you. You are amazing and fantastic, and I love everything you're doing in your business. Whichever of the 103 countries with downloads that you are from, including Germany, which has made its way into the top 5, Brazil and Singapore, which have both made the top 10, thank you for listening. Or if you're from California, which has upended my home state of Washington for the number one spot, or from any of the other 50 states, all of which have downloads and listeners, thank you. I appreciate you all and want to thank you for making the podcast what it is. This has been, as I said, a truly amazing and humbling 6 months, and it could not have happened without you. I can't wait to see what 2019 brings. Thank you for listening, interacting, downloading, sharing, rating, reviewing. Truly, thank you all. While I didn't explicitly call out the show notes there, I do want to make sure you know they can be found within the app you're listening to or by visiting the website at thebrainybusiness.com/28 because, as you know, this is episode 28. The show notes include links to studies, articles, complimentary episodes. Like I said, my 3 favorite episodes are linked in there, as well as the others in the series on the senses. And you'll also see a full outline of what's discussed in the episode for anyone who would prefer to scan for topics instead of listening through everything. That is an option for you. And because this is a foundational episode, there is a free worksheet to go along with the sense of touch within the show notes as well. When you download the freebie, you are going to be put onto the list and given a secret link to all the freebies so you can access them at any time without having to sign up over and over, which I know many of you were doing. Thank you for putting in the time to do that over the year, but I have created this special page for you to make it really easy. Again, the freebie for this episode is at thebrainybusiness.com/28. And if you're in the States and want to sign up to get onto the list from your phone, simply text the word Brainy to 345-345 to get onto the list. And to say thank you, I will send you a free copy of my ebook, The 10 Behavioral Economics Concepts You Need to Know and How to Apply Them. And that will also be available on the subscriber page of the website, which you will get the link to when you sign up. All right, that is it for shout outs and housekeeping items. Let's now jump right into the sense of touch. When I started this series on the senses, touch was one of the topics I was most excited to share with all of you. One of the reasons I saved it for last, actually. All the senses are amazing and they all help shape our lives, but touch is directly connected to buying behavior in a way that is just fascinating to behold. We value things more once we've touched them, and the triad of the endowment effect, perceived ownership, and loss aversion are triggered directly by touch, which I'm going to get into, of course, during the episode. But first, I'm going to tell you a little about how touch works. Unlike the other senses, which are much more foreign to us, touch seems like something we just inherently get. Touch is directly linked to our emotional language. We say things like, "That just feels wrong," or "It was a touching piece," almost as if they're nothing. But it's really intriguing when you think about it. How do things that have no tactical implications, things we do not actually sense with our skin, still impact the sense of touch? I've linked to a TED Talk on the science of touching and feeling, which you can and should check out after the episode. In it, Dr. David Linden talks about how the sense of touch impacts and is tied to our emotions. All of our senses are important, but we can get along without most of them. People without a sense of smell, sight, taste, or hearing can still have wonderful, fulfilling lives. Touch is not the same. In the 1970s, overpopulated orphanages in Romania meant many children were not able to be attended to in a loving way. They were not held or hugged because there was no one available to do so. And these children developed disorders beyond their skin. They developed attachment disorders and learned to self-soothe in compulsive and unhealthy ways like rocking back and forth, and also had cognitive delays, stunted growth, and gastrointestinal issues, as well as weak immune systems. Many things we would not associate with touch on the surface. So, if it's not obviously touch. How did they know that the lack of touch and human contact is what influenced all of this? As more volunteers came to the orphanages, those infants under the age of 2, who were then able to get just 30 minutes of loving touch a day, being held or hugged, had almost a complete reversal of the symptoms. The effects, unfortunately, were permanent for those who received intervention over the age of 2. However, that does not mean touch is no longer important once someone hits 3 years of age. Our sense of touch and having contact with others is important for development throughout life. As Dr. Linden says in that great TED Talk, touch is social glue. It's what binds us all together. Parents, partners, siblings, friends, we become closer when we have this appropriate touch between people. And doctors who appropriately touch patients during exams have been shown to have better ratings on compassion scores, and their patients actually have better outcomes and lower stress hormone levels. I'm not going to get into the politics of touch and how this has changed, especially recently, but it's important to the development of people and society and something to keep in mind as policies are developed and in our interactions with others. Have you ever watched a movie where the main character is struggling to emotionally overcome some sort of obstacle? If you've ever seen a movie, the answer is probably yes. But let's say the main character is someone who's closed off, detached, distant, and difficult. Due to this time of year, let's think of The Grinch. Or if you aren't familiar, even though I do have a little link in the show notes, it is very similar to Scrooge in the Dickens book, A Christmas Carol. While it may not be directly stated, the Grinch or Scrooge are averse to touch until developing emotionally as a character. As the Grinch can feel more emotionally, he's also more receptive to touch. And we see this throughout the movie or in the book, but don't really realize what's happening. When the Grinch's heart grows 3 sizes, it's a way of expressing his ability to be open to the emotion of a society and everything that comes with it. The Who's in Whoville are holding hands and singing to help him realize that Christmas is not about gifts, but about emotional closeness with others. Even if you've seen the movie many times, you might not remember the closing line. It says, "Christmas Day is in our grasp, so long as we have hands to clasp. Christmas Day will always be just as long as we have we. Welcome Christmas while we stand heart to heart and hand in hand." I've said it before, I'll say it again. That Dr. Seuss knew more than we give him credit for. He was a smart man. As I alluded to earlier in the episode, I'm not going to get too in depth on how this sense works because it's pretty similar to the others in that some area of the body reads a stimulus and it has to be interpreted by the brain, which you've heard me say 4 straight weeks now. But one last sort of grouping of things you need to know is the skin has many nerve endings. They're all over your skin and just surface, and they each have different jobs. Some are receptive to temperature, others to pressure or pain. The fingertips have many nerve endings for pressure, which is why they can be used to read Braille. The tongue or lips could do this as well, but you could not read Braille with your forearm or cheek because they do not have the right kinds of nerve endings in the proper density to be able to understand and interpret Braille. As with so many things in life, the brain cannot value one-off items properly. This is the concept of relativity, which was the focus of episode 12. If I was to place a bowl of water in front of you and ask if it's hot or cold, your answer will differ based on the circumstances immediately preceding the physical act of touching the water. For example, if the water is the exact same temperature as the room, which is a comfortable temperature for this example, you would likely not have a good answer of it being hot or cold. Perhaps the water is tepid or lukewarm. But what if I placed 2 more bowls of water in front of you? One has very hot, but not scalding water, and the other is a bowl of ice water. You place one hand in each of those bowls and keep it there for 30 seconds or a minute. And now you place both hands in the lukewarm bowl at the same time. Do they have the same sensation or interpretation of the water? Of course not. The ice cube hand will feel like the lukewarm water is incredibly hot, almost burning, while the hot water hand will feel the water as very cold. As with the truth about pricing, where it isn't really about the price, it's not about the water and its temperature. It's about everything leading up to the touch and temperature that matters. It's like if you've ever been in a hot tub and then jumped into a swimming pool, it feels much colder than if you were to just go directly into the pool. The nerve endings in our bodies are different than emotional touch and sensation, which is also incredibly important both to the human condition in general and in business. For those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while or heard me speak before, you know I love to compare the subconscious brain to a small child. If you've ever had kids, you will definitely know what I'm about to mention, and many of you without children are likely familiar with this phenomenon as well. If a child falls down or bonks their head, they might not cry right away. In many cases, they look to the adults around them to determine if they're actually hurt. So when a baby bonks into a wall and mom runs over frantically saying, "Oh no, that must have hurt so badly, my poor baby," the child will react differently than the mom who either ignores the incident, intentionally, of course, noting we don't have a bleeding infant on our hands, or laughs lightly and says, "Bonk, bonk, silly baby. Hey, what's that?" In the first scenario, the baby will learn that everything hurts and there's a strong emotional tie to touch. The second baby may learn to be more resilient and evaluate sensations to determine if they're painful or something to learn from. Emotion and touch are very closely linked, and we form bonds with the way things feel. I'm going to dig into each of these aspects of touch and how they impact business as we move through the episode. But now that you know a little about how the sense of touch works physically, and there are, of course, links in the show notes if you want more details, let's start talking about the first of the many impacts it has on your business. First, let's talk teamwork. As I've already alluded to here in the episode from that story about the orphans in Romania, human contact is important to our development throughout our lives, and touch has been shown to impact the overall effectiveness of teams. A study from UC Berkeley found that NBA basketball teams who engaged in more celebratory touch during the first half of the season, be it through high fives, chest bumps, pats on the back, or hugs, ended up winning more games and played better together than those teams with less celebratory touch in the second half of the season. That also meant less ball hogging from star players and better overall camaraderie and performance in addition to their winning records. While we've all likely been to that team building event, which seems totally hokey and awkward in the moment, they can be incredibly effective. There's a reason that they've endured for such a long time. Appropriate touch among teams, be it NBA players or in the marketing department, have been proven to have an impact on performance. Similarly, a waitress who touches the arm of a patron in a platonic way, whether that patron's male or female, will get more tips when the bill comes. If you're like me and you think you might recoil at this, try and be aware of it and look around. Someone may be providing comforting touch, or you might do this yourself in conversations and not even notice. It's part of who we are as humans, and it impacts our relationships, which means it impacts sales and business. Of course, there is always a flip side. If you touch someone and it is not well received, yikes, it's going to burn much more than a bridge, let me tell you. So this is something to use with caution. Definitely look to your HR department, things like that. If you're going to be incorporating appropriate touch, appropriate is the key word there. And as I said, not getting into the politics of this. So we're going to move on. Let's talk about objects and the touch of an object. As I mentioned, our fingertips are incredibly sensitive to touch. We can tell the difference between thick or thin paper, glossy or matte, if the print is raised or pressed in, or if it's flat, and many other things without looking at an item. Whether we realize it or not, the texture of the paper an item is printed on says a lot to our subconscious about the business as a whole. If someone was to print their business cards on a laser printer at home and then cut them out by hand, would you be able to tell the difference if they gave it to you at a conference or a networking event? Absolutely. And what does that say about a business? Cheap, not a real business, not willing to invest in their own success, sloppy, unable to properly value their own time, and so much more. Do you realize this consciously? Maybe a little, or on a few of those items, especially if it's cut out very randomly. But many of these things are not going to alert your conscious. You're going to flag that person in your unprofessional pile subconsciously and move along. Later, when you say, something just doesn't feel right, again, notice that touch, sensation, feeling word about working with them, you likely are not going to put two and two together, and you couldn't tell them what it is, but that first impression is everything and could be impacting every decision from that point forward. So, invest in high quality materials and ones that reflect your brand and message. For example, if you're sending out something about being green or eco-friendly, it is better to be on obviously recycled paper. You want that texture to be rough. Maybe even print on a sheet of paper that can be planted and grow into flowers. They make that, you know. It says something about your brand, and like the sound in your physical location is more impactful when it's in alignment with your branding and persona, the feel of something, even as simple as the paper your business cards are printed on, will do the same thing. If you want to show you're out of the box, there are many options. I've gotten wooden and metal business cards, and they definitely say something about the person who gives them to me. And this goes far beyond business cards. Think about everything that's physically touched. Let's just start with print. Postcards, letterhead, envelopes, thank you cards. They all say something about your brand. Hopefully, you put a lot of thought into the words you send out in the world from your business. But did you think much about the paper it's printed on? You should. Because as you've heard me say on this podcast many, many times, everything matters. What about moving beyond paper products? Businesses have many other physical items people can touch, and it's absolutely in your best interest to have someone touch an item if you can. If you remember the episode on loss aversion, which was number 9, by the way, and I highly recommend listening to it after this one if you haven't already or if you just want a refresher. I talked about the overnight test drive and how quickly our brains take ownership over items. Merely touching an item greatly increases the ownership someone feels over that item, and then the brain doesn't want to give it up. The brain says, this is mine now. And once you've started to envision the person you would be if you owned the item, this happens when you see it, but touching it puts that instinct into overdrive. And remember, our brains are wired to seek out rewards, which I talked about extensively in the episodes on habits. That means your brain wants you to reach out and touch things. Have you ever walked through a store and seen a cozy looking sweater or a soft blanket or other item and felt compelled to touch it. You may not be in the market for a new throw, but this looks so soft and cozy. Is it as soft as I think it is? Ooh, that's so nice. And before you know it, you have one for yourself and each of your friends or family members because you want to give that gift, that feeling to others. And that's something, it says something about you giving this gift. It's not a coincidence that you can see and touch the item in that box. Toys often have a press here or feel this message on the box with a big arrow. Blankets don't need to be packaged with a hole in the box so you can feel the texture, but they often are. And while it's nice of them to let you try before you buy, these companies know that touch increases purchases. Similarly, getting people to try things on in a store greatly increases the likelihood they will buy them. In a previous business, I did a lot of book editing. One of the books I edited was about the strategy of dressing rooms and how they impact a clothing store. Really just amazing stuff. One of the things the author said was that far too many stores, the unsuccessful ones, neglect the power of the dressing room. They're badly lit, messy, and unappealing. You've probably been in this dressing room before. No one's making it easy for you to try things on. They often treat you like a potential shoplifter, limiting items you can take in and making it more of a get in and get out as fast as possible kind of experience. And that is not conducive to purchases. Have you ever used a personal shopper? It's amazing, and I highly recommend it if you haven't. I hired a stylist a couple years ago who helped me pare down my closet and buy new great pieces that worked for me, totally worth the investment. She arrived in advance to the store, set up the dressing room with tons of items for me to try on. I didn't have to worry about sizes or grabbing new items or putting things together. It was just easy. And she was able to gauge if something looked good on me or not. And she had snacks and it was well lit. And she told me what should be altered and not. And it was just so easy. I could completely experience the clothing and focus on what I liked, what felt good, what made me feel great, and none of the other stuff. And you know what? I bought a lot. Much more than I would have on my own. If every store experience was like this, people would buy more. Some stores have personal shoppers you can connect with, and it makes you more likely to try things on that you might not have otherwise. But the act of trying them on is the key. This is what leads to sales. I used to love the show What Not to Wear on TLC. Did you ever watch that? Clinton and Stacy would have an unsuspecting person who they would save from their terrible wardrobe and teach them what to buy. It's very similar to my dressing room experience, except maybe that was a little more harsh. One of their lessons that always stuck with me was that you should incorporate into every outfit, they said, color, pattern, texture, and shine. Not everyone is going to touch your clothing. So why does texture matter? We can see and interpret what something might feel like using our eyes, and that creates visual interest and appeal. I've linked to a study called Visual Perception of Texture of Textiles, which found that the images of textiles and fabrics, which incorporated good light, could stimulate and create the psychological perception of that texture itself. So, the visual stimuli from the image of a fabric could cause the individual's memory of similar textures that they had touched to be brought to mind and help create the perception of touch. This is very similar to the story I told you in the episode on taste about mirror neurons with the monkey who saw the researcher eating the ice cream cone, and their brain, the brain of the monkey, was behaving as though the monkey was moving its arm, eating the ice cream cone itself, even though it wasn't moving at all. Our eyes do the same thing with the interpretation of a texture, the feel of something, even if we aren't touching it. Seeing fabric or surfaces with interesting textures, even from a distance, will stimulate the brain as if you were touching that fabric and receiving some of those benefits from the joy of touch. Think of this when dressing for important occasions. People do judge the book by its cover, and similar to the paper you print things on, texture and the power of touch are actually a big influence on how people perceive you, even if they will never touch your outfit. When I'm going to be on a stage or going to a networking event, I look for outfits that incorporate textures, shine, pattern, and color because they are able to use all the senses. We can emotionally feel something with our eyes, and it helps us to make decisions about the person in front of us. Similarly, the feel of a piece, whether it's a couch, countertop, car interior, carpet, blanket, shoe, sock, jacket, and everything in between, makes a big impact on purchase behavior. What about faux furs or leathers? If there is a way to manufacture a faux leather for a couch, let's say it costs a quarter of the amount you use to produce a real leather, and it feels the same or better, you can sell the item for less and make more per unit than if it was using real leather. But if it feels fake, consumers will know and rebel quickly. It will feel cheap, even if it costs more to make. It's about the feel of the item that can help interpret the way that they perceive your entire brand. So be aware of this when producing items, and think about packaging as well. If you ship things in a box, what does it feel like? Is it rough or soft? Easy to open? Does it have a lining, or is it just thrown together? This all impacts the overall experience. This may lead you to ask, but how do I get them to physically touch the item in our online sales world? With Amazon taking over everything, or otherwise advertising online, does touch come into play before the consumer can actually touch the item in question? You bet it does. This is the power of touch without touch. And just like that conversation about an outfit and how our eyes can perceive the texture of a fabric, this works with all sorts of items and the way that an individual can imagine themselves owning the item. I've linked to another study called The Effect of Mere Touch on Perceived Ownership, which talks, of course, about the power of touch. But they also talk about the benefits of envisioning yourself as touching the object that is in front of you or in an image in front of you. The article starts by saying how in 2003, holiday shoppers in Illinois were warned of retailers encouraging them to hold items or imagine them as their own while shopping. Why? Because it can increase impulse buys. Let's do a little test. I want you to picture a leather couch. The description says material, leather, and leaves it at that. Does it sound appealing? Do you want to touch or feel the couch? Are you interested at all? Probably not. I mean, you've felt leather before. You have an idea of what that is, either good or bad. You don't really care to learn much more. What about this? Buttery soft and supple chocolate brown leather. Maybe that piques your interest a little more. Well-chosen words can make your brain trigger its texture centers, so you're responding as if you were touching it, triggering perceived ownership, loss aversion, and an increased likelihood of buying. The truth of the matter is this. Touch, whether it is actually happening in your hands or simply in your mind, impacts sales. And this can be done with really great imagery of maybe someone wrapped in a blanket and obviously enjoying the feel of it. Our brain can interpret that using its mirror neurons and understand that power of touch. The power of touch is, of course, most impactful when someone can physically touch something. But if you are not able to get something in their hands, words, sounds, and images make big differences. And as I've already mentioned throughout the episode, this impacts service businesses as well. The materials you send out and the way you interact in person greatly impact the sense of touch. Because touch is all around us, we tend to associate terms of touch with the way we interpret people and brands. For example, saying a politician is slippery shapes your opinion of them. Slippery is nothing more than a touch term, but it impacts your overall perception of the person. Have you ever said a salesperson was slimy? Same thing. Someone can make you feel comfortable or rub you the wrong way, and it's important to consider the impression you're leaving on others in your interactions and what that is meaning in these touch terms, the way that you make people feel. It's exactly the same for brands big and small. Whether you are with a Fortune 500 company or a solopreneur, brands need to think about the way they make people feel and how that ties in with the overall company experience. If you've been following along with the freebies on the episodes about the senses, you've already done some work on your goals and how they align with perception. If not, you can check those out in the show notes or think about your company's own goals now. What do you want people to feel or think about your brand? What is your persona? Are you about luxury or are you targeting people on a budget? Are you environmentally friendly first and foremost? Are you a nonprofit that wants to show you're fiscally and fiduciarily responsible? The materials you choose for everything you do, from physical products to chairs in the lobby and business cards, postcards, and letterhead, all impact the perception of your brand. Are yours reinforcing your brand at every turn or making it more confusing for your customers in a way that they can't articulate to you? When things are out of alignment, customers can tell something's off, and that impacts sales. Everything you do should be run through this brand filter, and you should consider how all the senses are impacted. As I've shown in these past 5 episodes, all the senses are impacting our lives much more than we realize. When you use intention and strategy in your brand, culture, products, pricing, and approach to include the complete sensory experience of your customer, you are putting yourself leaps and bounds ahead of the competition because most people ignore these things, even though they're hugely important when it comes to sales and buying behavior. And if you would like help with incorporating touch and the rest of the senses properly into your business, you're not alone. This is exactly what I work with my clients on in our one-on-one work. Clients hire me to give them concrete steps and strategies to incorporate behavioral economics and how the brain actually works into everything from pricing to branding, change management to imagery, and the impact of touch. And don't forget, this is your last chance to uplevel your brand with a series of strategy sessions in 2019 for up to 20% off. Instead of $499 for each strategy session, they're as low as $400 a piece if you know up front you want to do 12, meaning you could save as much as $1,200. It's such a great deal. But you do have to commit before the end of the year. So if you're thinking about making an investment in your business by taking me up on this offer, send an email to melina@thebrainybusiness.com right now. Even if you just felt a twinge of maybe, send an email. You don't want to miss out on your opportunity to take advantage of this great deal. Just think of all the success you could have in your business with the right focus, partner, and brain-friendly messaging. I'm so excited to work with you in 2019 and help incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Again, that email is melina@thebrainybusiness.com. All right, that's it. Episode 28 on touch, the series on the 5 senses, and the final episode for 2018 are a wrap. I wish you and yours a happy new year. Thank you again for joining the Brainy Business family. I've so enjoyed interacting with all of you this year. If you have a favorite episode or something that you learned during the year, please let me know on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as The Brainy Biz, B-I-Z, and I would love to hear from you. Next week, we are starting 2019 off right with an episode about commitments and how to keep those New Year's resolutions once and for all. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.